Okay, for tonight's homework, I'm going to review with you the distance formula. Remember the distance formula? Find the distance between any 2 points. It's the difference of the two x values squared plus the difference or subtracting the two y values squared. So when I'm doing this, I'm going to write those coordinates right next to each other. So for this first problem, 12, A is the point 2, 2. And B is the point 6, 4. Remember, a coordinate is always x first, y second. Coordinate always x first, y second. I'm going to have you pair up the numbers you're going to subtract in this formula, the two x numbers and the two y numbers. I'm going to have you subtract in the same direction, left to right, the way we follow order of operations. So I'm going to make sure I subtract these two x numbers together in this formula and subtract the two y numbers together. So here I go. I'm going to plug them in. So my distance between those 2 points is the square root of the difference of my two x values. So 2 minus the other x value, 6. 2 minus 6 squared plus the difference of the two y coordinates, 2 minus 4 squared. That gives me the square root of negative 4 squared. 2 minus 6 is negative 4, plus 2 minus 4, negative 2 squared. That gives me the square root of 16 plus 4, because remember, negative 4 times negative 4 is 16. Negative 2 times negative 2 is 4. That gives me 16 plus 4, which is root 20. Before we simplify that, just on my calculator, the square root of 20 is the decimal number 4.47. So that means 4.47 times another 4.47 gives me 20. Or this distance here, since it's not straight lines, I can't count boxes, is about 4.47 boxes between those 2 points. All right, next problem. For 13, again, I'm going to pair up my x's and pair up my y's. So first I'm going to shrink this down. I'm going to write these two values next to each other. So looks like my first point A is 2, 1. My second point B is 5, 16. So 2, 1. And the other coordinate is 5, 16. Again, remember, x first, y second. X first, y second. I'm going to pair up my x's, pair up my y's. I'm going to subtract left to right. I'm going to make sure in my distance formula I subtract the two x coordinate numbers, 2 minus 5 squared, plus, and then the y, subtract the two y coordinates squared. Make sure you don't mix up an x with a y. So 2 minus 5, knowing my negative rules, gives me negative 3 squared. 1 minus 16 is negative 15 squared. Negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9. Negative 15 times negative 15 is positive 225. When I add those together, I get the square root of 234. And again, on my calculator to get that decimal, that gives me the decimal number of looks like 15.29. Remember, 15.29 times another 15.29 is 234, or the distance between these 2 points is about 15.29 boxes or units. All right, next problem here, dealing with decimals and double negatives. So here we go. So I'm going to write these coordinates right next to each other. Negative 3, 1.5. The other one is 3.5, negative 4.5. I'm going to label x and y. I'm going to pair up my x's and pair up my y's. So my x numbers are going to subtract together, and my y numbers are going to subtract together. So my distance is -3 minus 3.5. Not a worry there. That is going to give me a bigger negative number. But this one, 1.5, subtracting a value that's negative, that's 1.5 subtracting negative 4.5. If you're subtracting something already negative, that is a double negative that will turn to plus right there. So this problem, finishing it out, I get the square root of negative 6.5. These two negative numbers combined to an even bigger negative number, and that is negative 6.5 squared. 1.5 minus 4.5 turns into 1.5 plus 4.5 squared. Negative 6.5 times another negative 6.5 gives me positive, and I'm not going to do that yet. I'm just going to write this out as 1.5 plus 4.5 is not 7. I'm going to fix that. It really is 6, so I'm going to erase that. And write that as a 6. Negative 6.5 times another negative 6.5 gives me positive 42.25. 6 times 6 is positive 36. When I add those up, I get the square root of 78.25. When I use my calculator to find the decimal that times, it gives me 78.25. The square root, I get 8.84. So if I multiply 8.84 times another 8.84, it gives me 78.25. Or the distance between these is 8.84 boxes. All right, last one, dealing with just letters and then the FOIL process, which is a Math 2 concept, which I'm going to show you a little bit of. PQ and JK. Point PQ where X is P and Y is Q, and the next point, the second X is J, the second Y is K. So I'm going to label those X, Y. I'm going to pair up the two values subtracted for X's and the two values for Y. That gives me the square root of P minus J squared plus Q minus K squared. And at this point, you could just leave that answer like that. That is fine. Show me you know which values you're subtracting, even if they're letters. But I'm going to show you what happens when you really square these. So when you have P minus J times another P minus J, this is a FOIL pattern, which means I'm going to do a double distribute. I'm going to take this P times this P, and then take this P all the way down times this negative J. And when I'm done with that, I'm going to distribute this negative J times P, and then that same negative J times another negative J. Here I'm going to show the arrow patterns. So P times this P, and then that P all the way down, this J times both. P times P gives me P to the second power. P times negative J is negative PJ. When I multiply these two inside ones, I could write that JP, but I'm going to write that consistent with the other one, PJ. These will combine in the middle, but again, P times P, P squared. P times negative J is negative PJ. Negative J times P is another negative PJ, and then negative J times another negative J gives me positive J squared. I'm going to combine those two middle terms to get P squared minus 2 of those PJs plus J squared. So believe it or not, that is P minus J squared. Next I'm going to do Q minus K squared. So with Q minus K, that is Q minus K times another Q minus K. That gives me Q times Q is Q to the second power. Q times that's negative K is negative QK. When I do another one of those, I get another minus qk. Negative k times negative k is negative or positive k squared. But again, watch the pattern. Q times this q, q to the second power. Q times this minus qk. Another q times a negative k, another minus qk. And then negative k times a negative k, positive k squared. These two middle terms combine to give me negative 2qk. Again, don't worry about that. If you want to leave your answer like this, that is fine. If you want to put those two inside there, you can, but I would not suggest that. Your homework, do these problems and write a complete sentence about each one. Good luck.